and welcome back, seniors, to our final set of lectures for Lesson 3. This lesson has to do with Roman Catholicism since World War II. Again, you should open your 3B notes, whether on paper or on another device. You can fill them out as you listen to the lecture. And today's lesson will focus on Roman Catholicism and pick up where we left off, or where it was in the modern era and through the world wars, and how things changed, beginning once again in the notorious decade of the 1960s. So let's begin by going over some objectives too. You should be able to fill out the study guide as well, and some things that we'll be focusing on is that if we look at our big ideas here, the Catholic Church radically changed after its decisions in the most recent and 21st Ecumenical Council, called the Second Vatican Council, or Vatican II. And we'll see how the Church has been led by some strong popes in recent decades who have tried to reestablish the Church as a peacemaker and as an important part of contemporary culture. However, there's been conflicts with this, especially given the challenges due to the sex abuse scandals that have plagued the Catholic Church and its leadership. Our goals for this lesson will be to be able to list the distinctions and accomplishments of Vatican II. Again, that's the most recent ecumenical council, and you'll watch a video on that after this brief introduction. You should be able to name the popes since the year 2000, so the last 3 popes of the Catholic Church, and their contributions to the faith. You should be able to define ecumenicism and interreligious dialogue. We introduced these topics in Lesson 2 as they became important parts of Protestant theology in Europe after the World Wars, and they also have become important for the Catholic Church as well. And you should be able to state recent accomplishments of the Catholic Church as well as recent setbacks. So to finish this introduction, we want to pick up with where was the Church after the modern era and into the world wars. Well, a couple ways to describe it would be hierarchical. And what does hierarchical mean? Well, it means that it was a top-down church, meaning the Pope viewed himself more or less as the king, as the boss. If you remember, we talked about papal infallibility, the idea that the Pope cannot be wrong when he speaks ex cathedra. And that's, although the doctrine's only been employed twice in the 1870s, once in the 1870s, and then again in the 1950s. It has happened twice, and again it was in the 1950s that you had the doctrine of the Assumption of Mary, that she never died but was taken into heaven because she had never sinned and had no sin in her. So the church was very much heavy from the top, and the people in the Vatican had a lot of clout and authority. A second thing, the Catholic Church was very fundamentalist or conservative. I don't mean fundamentalist like the actual fundamentalists, but we can use the word conservative or traditional, even maybe that's a better word. Let's use that word. And so if you recall, in the modern era, the Catholic Church had condemned and argued against modern science, against biblical criticism, against liberal theology, against modern philosophy. It insisted on keeping everything in Latin, in scripture and liturgy, and it, if anything, was getting more conservative rather than changing like much of Protestantism did. Finally, the church was also, sorry about the hello from one of my daughter's friends. This is her iPad. Finally, the church was also characterized by very harsh it was excommunicating those who belonged to. Oh, actually, instead of doing harsh, we'll talk about how it's anti-communism. That's a better way to put it. If you remember, the Orthodox Church, especially in Russia, was being plagued by persecution from communism, and Catholic countries on Eastern Europe, such as Poland, that are on the border of the Western Eastern line, also faced persecution, and the Catholic Church viewed communism with its anti-religious views and with its rejection of traditional hierarchy, such as the Pope, but even its rejection of traditional class structures and things, it viewed it as oppressive. And it even excommunicated anybody who belonged to a communist organization. So that was the Catholic Church through the 1950s. Hierarchical, again, Pope used and claimed a lot of power. Traditional, condemned anything modern, anything that went against the traditional views of the Catholic Church, and was very anti-communist, again, very against the anti-religious views of communism, but also the way that communism structured economics and social power. However, in 1962, everything changed. Well, perhaps not everything, but much changed as Pope John the 23rd called for an ecumenical council dedicated towards community and a thoughtful response to modernity. So you may want to highlight those. Community, I'm going to do hot pink, and a thoughtful response to modernity. And this council is called the Second Vatican Council. Or Vatican II. And there is a worksheet available on Google Classroom, and you should fill out the first page of that worksheet as you watch a video that I think does a good overview of how the Second Vatican Council was different than previous ecumenical councils, why it was important, what it changed about the Catholic Church, and such. After you watch that video, again, the link is also on Google Classroom, then you can pick up with the second part of this lesson that brings the Catholic Church from Vatican II to today. Thank you.